Hackers don't need to break into your system if they can just trick you into handing over the keys. Always verify who you're talking to.
Okay, let's jump right into this explainer. We're tackling the ultimate cybersecurity paradigm shift today: zero trust architecture. Look, I know you've heard the buzzwords probably a million times by now, but today, we're stripping all that marketing jargon away. We're going to look at the actual nuts and bolts mechanics of how modern networks are defending themselves.
So, I want you to really think about a pretty terrifying scenario for a second. Imagine an attacker somehow getting inside your corporate network right now. They've compromised just a single credential. How far could they move laterally before anyone even notices? Well, in traditional systems, the answer is usually way too far. And that chilling reality, that is exactly why zero trust exists. It's all about containing that damage instantly.
Here is our roadmap for today's explainer. We'll be covering the broken castle, what is zero trust, the core principles, the policy brain and muscle, and finally, strategy, not a product. Let's get into it. Section 1. The broken castle. The failure of legacy security.
For decades, we've relied on this old castle and moat model. We built a massive firewall, our digital moat, right? And we just assumed that absolutely anyone or anything inside those walls was totally safe. You log into the corporate VPN, you cross the moat, and boom, you have the keys to the kingdom. You have access to the whole internal network. But think about the classic Trojan horse. If an employee's laptop gets snagged at a local cafe and their VPN session is still active, that attacker is instantly inside the castle. The moat is completely useless.
So there's a really stark contrast between that outdated model and our modern reality. Legacy security trusted you based on your location. Basically, if you looked like you were internal, you were allowed in by default. Zero trust flips that entirely on its head. It is a default deny environment. It literally doesn't care where you are sitting. It demands continuous verification of your identity and your current context. That whole assumption of safety? Yeah, it's completely gone.
Because the truth is, in today's threat landscape, breaches are inevitable. Attackers are going to get in, it's just a matter of time. But while the breach itself is inevitable, the blast radius is totally optional. By breaking the network down into these tiny, locked rooms, a process we call microsegmentation, zero trust stops that lateral domino effect dead in its tracks. You're basically containing the fire to a single room instead of letting the whole building burn down.
Moving on to Section 2, what is zero trust? The paradigm shift. If we look at the official 2018 NIST publication, which, by the way, really catapulted this whole concept into the mainstream, they define it as a framework that eliminates implicit trust. That phrase right there, implicit trust, is the true enemy here. We humans tend to implicitly trust things we build ourselves, or users who've been with a company for like 10 years. But just because an application was written by your internal dev team doesn't mean it should implicitly have access to your production database without checking. Every single action needs justification.
And while zero trust might feel like this brand new, flashy marketing buzzword, the foundational math behind this has actually been evolving for decades. Get this, back in 1994, Stephen Paul Marsh wrote his PhD thesis on asserting trust as a mathematical, finite measure. Then Forrester officially coined the term in 2010, Google proved it worked at scale with BeyondCorp in 2014, and finally, NIST codified it in 2018. So this isn't some passing fad, it's the culmination of years of really rigorous security evolution.
The absolute most crucial point boils down to this: never trust, always verify. Trust is no longer this permanent stamp of approval you get at the front door. It's highly ephemeral. It has to be continuously earned every single time you request a new resource.
All right, Section 3, the core principles, the rules of zero trust.
For a system to truly be zero trust, it absolutely has to follow these rules. First off, you must assume your network is already breached. Always. Second, every user and application must explicitly prove who they are. Third, you apply the principle of least privilege. Now this means a user or script gets the absolute bare minimum access required to do its job and nothing more. And finally, you have to continuously monitor the health of the device. If an operating system is out of date, or maybe an identity pops up in 2 totally different countries within a 5-minute window, boom, access is revoked immediately. And that brings us to a really major pitfall. An IP address is not an identity. Actually, relying on an IP address is a terrible way to establish who someone is, because context changes constantly. Your network needs to know who the user is, what device they're on, and if that specific context warrants access right now. A static address tells you absolutely none of that behavioral data.
Which brings us to Section 4, the policy brain and muscle.
how Zero Trust actually works under the hood.
When you request a resource in a zero-trust environment, it follows a very specific flow. First, you make a request. That request goes to the policy engine. Think of this as the brain. The brain looks at your credentials, your device health, the threat intelligence feeds, all of it. If it decides you're safe, it tells the policy administrator to execute that decision. Then, the policy enforcement point, the actual muscle sitting right in front of the app or network, physically opens or closes the gate. Because there's this strict separation between the intelligence making the decision and the muscle enforcing it, an attacker can't just brute force their way through the gate.
I absolutely love this analogy. Think of it like airport security. You know, in the old days, you went through security at the front doors of the building, and then you could just wander anywhere you wanted inside. Well, under Zero Trust, passing through the front door doesn't give you free rein anymore. You have to go through a TSA checkpoint at every single gate, every single time you want to board a new flight. Is it a bit stricter? Yes. Is it infinitely safer? Absolutely.
And this strict gatekeeping applies across three main buckets of access. First, you have user to resource. This is your typical remote worker scenario, replacing those clunky old VPNs. Second, workload to workload, making sure an app service only talks to the specific database it needs to. And third, device to network. Now this is the hardest one. How do you secure headless IoT sensors or factory floor operational tech where you can't just install a security agent? The network itself actually has to step up and act as the enforcer.
This strict gatekeeping leads us right into privileged access. You know, we used to just hand IT admins the master keys to the server room and say, have at it. Under Zero Trust, we use something called brokered access. You don't get the keys anymore. Instead, a security guard, the policy engine, walks you to the door, unlocks it for you, watches your session the entire time you work, and the very second your context changes or you finish up, they lock the door and escort you out. It is dynamic and it is highly controlled.
All right, let's look at Section 5, Strategy, not a product. Time for a reality check.
Because despite what those glossy vendor marketing brochures might tell you, Zero Trust is a strategy. It is not a single product. You cannot just go out and buy Zero Trust in a box and install it on a Friday afternoon. It doesn't work like that. It's an overarching architectural journey. Sure, you can buy Zero Trust network access tools to replace a VPN, but guys, that's just one tiny piece of a much larger puzzle. It takes time, real planning, and significant cultural buy-in from your team.
A true Zero Trust strategy requires you to integrate a whole multitude of distinct tools into one cohesive framework. You're going to need robust identity and access management. You need tools to check endpoint device posture. You need network microsegmentation, rigorous data encryption, and underneath all of that, you absolutely need universal visibility and analytics. Because, simply put, you can't protect what you can't see. All of these completely disparate systems have to communicate seamlessly to inform that central policy engine. If one piece goes blind, the whole architecture suffers.
Ultimately, this entire shift relies heavily on one core philosophy. You have to design your security infrastructure on the paranoid yet highly practical assumption that the perimeter has already fallen, because frankly, it probably has. You have to operate from a baseline of compromise, which fundamentally changes how you build your defenses from the ground up.
So, I want to leave you with a final thought to really challenge how you view your own infrastructure today. Are you still relying on a digital moat to protect your most valuable assets, just hoping nobody steals a laptop or compromises a single password? Or are you ready to adapt, embrace this paradigm shift, and actually verify every single door? Thanks for joining me on this explainer. I really hope this helps clear up some of the